the money was for Oak Communication. It was supposed to be a cable movie. And they thought that it had no commercial, future at all. And I wrote the script, and just almost on a lark, they sent it to Tony Perkins. And Tony said yes. And they were like shocked that Tony said yes. And then we went ahead and did it with, with a lot of the original people. You had Hilton Green, who was the producer, who had been the first AD in the original Psycho. You had Henry Bumstead, doing the production design, who'd done the production design on the original, and who just passed away and has done all Clint Eastwood's movies. And we made the movie, and we made it for like nothing. I don't remember the exact figures, but it was something ridiculous, like direct, like $4 million. I don't know, it might even have been less than that without the studio overhead. And the movie turned out so well. No, what happened was they started publicizing it, through the studio, through their publicity department. And lo and behold, much to their amazement, there was a huge amount of interest in a sequel to Psycho, and also in the fact that Tony Perkins was playing Norman Bates again. And this thing that had started out as this ultra cheap, low budget cable movie started to gather interest, and finally the show turned out so well, the movie turned out so well, they decided to release it theatrically. In other words, Universal was dragged kicking and screaming into making a movie out of it, which was never their original intention anyway. It was supposed to be a cable movie. Richard contacted me off of a script that I did called The Crystal Tower, which was a sword fantasy, sword and wizard fantasy. Mm-hmm. And we got along, and he hired me. And I had done the year before that, I had done a movie called The Beast Within, which was another low-budget horror movie, but it hadn't done well. So I'd had my first feature film that I'd written had been made, and then I hadn't worked for a year. And so it was wonderful that Richard called me up and that we hit it off. And I think I probably worked harder in that script than I have in almost any other, or at least I approached it with more trepidation, because I was doing the sequel to Psycho, and I had sort of an overwhelming respect for Hitchcock, and it was like you didn't want to mess it up, you really had almost a moral obligation to make something that stayed true to the original, and yet had the tone of the original, and yet updated it at the same time. And so we really worked hard, and then I think I checked 10 ways from Sunday to make sure that all the plot points in Psycho 2 fit in with the original. I mean, it really was, the next step, what happens when Norman gets out. The problem always was, and it was because of Tony's performance, was that you had this serial murderer. I think they took it off of Ed Gein. How do you pronounce the name?
Ed Gein.
Ed Gein. But you'd had this wonderful actor, Tony Perkins, who was both repellent and sympathetic at the same time. It was that Norman wasn't black, Norman was gray, and you had to somehow work with the quality that Tony had as a human being, as an actor, where there was something vulnerable about him. At the same time, there was something that murderous. But it was this walking a thin line, trying to satisfy an audience, and the way we did that was that we exculpated Norman at the end. But Norman, unbeknownst to the authorities, is as mad as a hatter. And there was delicious irony and a lot of humor throughout it. And we were able to do the humor because there was humor in Hitchcock's, in the original. So, I was able to continue some of the ironic humor in Psycho too. I gotta tell you, I thought it was a terrific script. I mean, because it's like a series of traps set up. You can't, not only does it keeps you guessing about what's going on, but it also puts puts a lot of the characters that the characters you kind of like, it puts them in danger, and it makes you feel very ambivalent about the lead character, Norman, whom you know, love, and you know are terrified of from the first one. You know, he was a serial murderer, but his mother had driven him to it. You know, he had that quality. I also played a very small part. I was one of the
You're one of the deputy
sheriffs. Yes, I was.
What was it like to play a deputy in
I think that maybe a glimpse of me is on screen. It was just fun. Everybody was very nice. There was no anxiety on it because the movie was so small. I mean, nobody expected it to do anything. I remember Richard and I went and pulled out all the reviews. Maybe we did it from Universal, but all the collection of the newspaper reviews. They were horrendous. They attacked Hitchcock. My memory is Hitchcock almost lost his nerve and didn't release it theatrically. He used he wanted to do it really inexpensively, and he used the same crew from his TV show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I mean, even when they shot it, it was like a really low-budget movie, and you know, nobody expected it to be the enormous hit, nor the cataclysmic event it was in terms of film history, because it changed the horror movie. You know, it changed so much about filmmaking. Changed montage, changed level of acceptable violence. And there's so much it influenced. That's why I went into writing the sequel, writing the Psycho 2, which was 22 years later, so you could say it was a sequel, but it wasn't really either. It wasn't a sequel like they do sequels now. There was an original standing 22 years later on this construction that Hitchcock had done that we all stood in awe of. So there was, if you were a film student or a lover of film, it was a very intimidating, almost, moral, obligation to do the best you could on it.
At the beginning of Psycho 2, it opens actually with the shower scene from the first movie.
Right.
Did you script it that way to start out with that pivotal moment?
Sure did.
Oh, it was scripted that way. And
everything was scripted on that. That's probably the closest working relationship I've had with a director, Richard Franklin. And Richard was a student. He could have taught courses. He went to USC, but he could have taught a course in Alfred Hitchcock. He really is extremely knowledgeable, and I mean about the man's filmmaking technique. Not about not the personal life and all the rest of it. No, not about that, but about Hitchcock's place in film history and what he did and how he did it. And so, even a lot of the shots were meant to echo back. Looking through the girl, looking through the peephole, into a room, and then their eye appears and she falls back screaming. But that's from the original when Norman was watching. Marion, and they take a shower. The only change that I remember him asking for, and I think it was during production, was the grilled cheese or toasted cheese scene. He wanted a warm moment with the girl, and that's when he's frightened. And I think Richard vignetted the scene. I think it happens in an upstairs bedroom, and as he pulled back, he put black around the frame. I think that's that moment. But that scene he asked for, and I added that scene. I think it was like a page or a page and a quarter.